Okay, this is going to be our final panel for the day. It's good to see everybody's getting nice and cozy. So we are a smaller group, so if you want to move up, don't be shy. It'll be really cool to have everybody up front. I promise no questions will be asked of you unless you really want us to. All right, so we're going to be chatting about the impact of artificial intelligence. So as those people who don't know what AI is, they go, who's that said that to me? You professor, yes?
Yeah, I went
You walk around, people go, I. What are you doing? I want to do I. What is I? AI, yes, anyway. How does AI actually, and how will it have an impact on the economies of the African continent and globally? And to start this all off, the man from Westgrow, James Milne. I like your mo. It's really, really cool. Thanks. Andrea Belmont, look at her, the Iron Lady, but she's actually a teddy bear inside, I can tell you, from Knife Capital. Glenn, he doesn't look like his company's name, but Glenn Gillis from Seamonster.
The knife next to the monster, huh?
Isaac Matsaand from Data Profit, probably one of the most successful companies that we have on the app in South Africa, doing phenomenal work, so a pleasure having you here as well. And then Professor Saurabh from the University of Johannesburg. So, James, it's your panel. You've got an hour and a half. I'm kidding.
Thanks very much, Kino, and welcome to everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for making it through to the graveyard shift. I hope that we can deliver some interesting insights. So, the topic of the panel, as Kino said, is the impact that AI will have on the economies of the African continent and globally. But I thought maybe just useful to start off with a broad definition. I find this a very complex subject, and so I'm hoping to get educated by the rest of the panel today. Just a Britannica definition. Britannica defines artificial intelligence as the ability of a digital computer or computer-controlled robot to perform tasks commonly associated with human beings, or intelligent beings. The term is frequently applied to the project of developing systems endowed with the intellectual processes characteristic of humans, such as the ability to reason, discover meaning, generalize, or learn from past experience. So to jump into the panel itself, I think we're going to start off with quite a simple introductory component. So I think from my left, if you can just do a short introduction to yourselves, and then also give one practical example of how you use AI on a day-to-day basis. And that's not within your business, please, or within your field of work, but actually using AI in your day-to-day.
Sure. So my name is Saurabh, and I work as the... By the way, I have an interesting title. My title is DVC. The VC part was very confusing when I was speaking to people here, because they thought they thought it was a venture capital, and I had to... after the enthusiasm, I had to explain, by the way, I'm a deputy vice chancellor. I was really disappointed. Somebody's face just kind of goes like, oh gosh, I was hoping that there would be money. Anyway, in terms of the question that you have asked about, the artificial intelligence and how I use it, I think a way where a lot of us use it is when you say, hey, Google, I'm sorry if your phone responded to that. I could have said worse things, but I think that's an immediate thing. Is that the artificial intelligence is getting closer to real intelligence because computing is getting us there. And so, hey Google, I also use other apps like Live Transcribe. Sorry, I was just enjoying that because I could see that people were trying to switch off their phones as their mobile was getting active. And Live Transcribe is another one I use. And another tool that I use, because I do a lot of extensive amounts of writing, is I use a tool called Grammarly. By the way, that's my phone trying to respond, I'm sorry. And the Grammarly is an application that is used to use AI into complex set of documents that then helps to detect what are common errors, and also in case you have certain learnings that you need, and to automate parts of your writing on editorial works.
Amazing. I'm actually just finishing up my master's thesis, so I'm noting that one down.
Yeah.
Isaac?
I'm Isaac Matsaand. I'm the country sales manager for Data Profit. So it's my role to make sure that when it comes to looking for opportunities for Data Profit, no stone is left unturned, just to make sure that we are everywhere that we should be. And in terms of uses, I mean, it's a good thing that there are a lot of smart people out there who allow me to use this AI on a day-to-day basis. I think a lot of us do use it from time to time. When I want to unwind, watching a bit of TV, a bit of Netflix, a bit of YouTube, and it helps in this digital age. There's just so much that is happening, such that you get overwhelmed. I spend a lot of time trying to search for the exact thing that you're looking for. So you've got these AI-powered recommendation engines. You watch a lot of Netflix. This is what you should be looking at, or you might be interested in something like that. The same can be applied to YouTube. The same can be applied to things like Takealot, online shopping. Okay, we see that you've picked up this thing. Similar people with your profile, or people who've bought exactly what you've bought, also looked at this thing. Or Google Maps, something that I use every day. I was joking with my friend the other day that this phone is starting to scare me, even though I work in AI myself, that every time when it's around the time that I usually go home, my phone just flashes and tells me, okay, it's going to take you this amount of time to go home, and these are the best routes. So it's some of the things that we use on a day-to-day basis that we actually don't think that it's being powered by AI, but there's a lot of AI algorithms that are happening in the background.
I'm Glenn. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Seamonster. We're an animation and gaming company. We do a lot of work in augmented and virtual reality. And why I'm here is that a lot of what we do drops a lot of data, and how we make sense of that and censor that in terms of emotions is something we're fascinated in. But to answer the question specifically, I too am fascinated about ways, specifically the wisdom of crowds, and given the failure of democracy to find us decent leaders, Waze continues to find me a decent way home. But perhaps the augmented reality AI-based solution that we'll all be most familiar with over the last couple of months has been the Face app, which has been a gimmick, if you like. It's been around for actually quite some time, but it's the one where you could take a picture of yourself and then you could kind of age yourself. You can also make yourself younger, for example. You could do a whole lot of different things with it. You can change gender. And so right now, I think it's great as a little trick, and people are interested in seeing it. They don't realize just how much AI is involved in doing those heavy calculations. But as a company, we're fascinated by empathy and how we can teach that on a global scale, and how we can shift behavior within large corporate contexts around that, not least because of the role that empathy plays in design thinking, et cetera, et cetera. Now imagine if I could become younger or older, switch genders, and I could do that in the context of putting myself in somebody else's shoes. Well, that's what empathy is all about. So there's AI in a very real, practical kind of way. But right now, it's cool to see what I looked like 20 years ago. So, not like this.
Yeah, okay. My name is Andrea Belmont. I am the co-managing partner of Knife Capital, venture capital company here from Cape Town. And I'm really upset that I'm this kind of last person in this row, because I first thought about the Hey Google kind of thing. Then I kind of thought about the recommendation engine. Then I was thinking I'm going to talk about Google Maps or Waze or something like this. And okay, now I'm the last one, and I have to quickly go and think about some other way, practical way of using AI. But I think the most shocking thing for me is when I've just Googled for something, and then I go into Facebook or LinkedIn, and I just see those ads coming up exactly for the kind of thing, and just see how totally transparent we've become, and it's really not the fun part. But so that, of course, is in my private life. I think in my professional life, it's more seeing all those investment pitches coming up where AI is now the buzzword, and it looks like you can't really go and have any investment pitch without having one of those words in there. So yeah.
Would you like to swap positions?
It depends on how the question.
Why don't you start that side the next time round?
It depends, because it's a difficult question. I actually like everybody else.
Oh, really? Okay, so we'll see how it goes on this one, and then we'll... Okay, sorry, we're just sorting ourselves out here. I've got her back. I just need to know she's going to be fine. Okay, cool, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks very much for those inputs. I mean, I really like the practical insights. I think it's a way of showing just how quickly AI is moving into our lives. I mean, to many people, perhaps even without us realizing the fact that it's moving into our lives. I really also like the setup of this panel, because we've got an investor, we've got two businesses, and we've got the academic side. So really, I want everyone in the audience to really start thinking about the questions that you're going to ask. We've got a really nice, broad, diverse panel to ask questions of. I'm actually going to start off, though, with Isaac. Isaac, I've seen you on panels a lot lately. I mean, Data Profit's doing some absolutely incredible work here in South Africa, and I think it would be quite interesting if you just start off by sharing some of the work you're doing, and also some, maybe one or two of your most recent successes as a company.
All right. Thanks, James. I mean, please excuse me. I mean, I'm used to sitting in rooms and talking to engineers, so I'll try and not to get too technical. So what we do is we work within the manufacturing sector and using AI to improve quality of the output. So our solution is called Prescribe. And what it actually does is it's an AI expert system that identifies the best operating region or paradigm within a manufacturing setup and identifies that region and ensures that the manufacturers during their manufacturing process stick to that region. Because what you'll find is that traditionally manufacturers use the systems like your traditional statistical process control, which was devised so many years ago, but not for the tempo, the volume or the complexity at which we're collecting data now. And also a flaw is that when it looks at the individual process parameters, exactly that, individuals, not taking into account the intricate relationship of those process parameters and how they affect yield or how they affect quality. So what you'll then have within a manufacturing setup is you've got excellent engineers, but then it's not feasible for them to take into account all the information that is available to them and make valuable decisions that affect quality. So they're literally making repeated adjustments to the same process variables on a day-to-day basis. And it becomes sort of a case of whack-a-mole, trying to control this process. So what we've actually then done is we've built this AI system that ingests the historical process and quality data of any manufacturing process so that we understand what good looks like and understand what bad looks like, so that we tell or show the manufacturers that this is what your good operating region is and this is how you stay there, by giving dynamic prescriptions or recommendations to the operators on the line to say at this particular time your temperature should be here, and because you've made this change upstream, you also need to make these few changes further downstream to counteract for that change that you've made. Because the environment within which they're operating is changing constantly. Today is a bit of a hot day, tomorrow is a bit humid, etc. You've got machine wear and tear. How do you take into account all those changing variables to make sure that you're stable in the way you operate? So in a nutshell, that's sort of the solution that we've put together. And we've deployed it in several manufacturing subsectors, automotive manufacturing, long steel, mineral processing, and I will touch on one that's very recent, one of the biggest wheel manufacturers in the world. The biggest problem that they had was the late discovery of defects way downstream, but those defects were actually caused by something that is upstream. And with their clients, like Mercedes, like BMW, they're very big on quality. So you get that they'll be getting a lot of rejects due to these small defects that with your human eye, you wouldn't be able to detect. But the professionals know about that. So upon deploying the solution within the foundry setup of that manufacturing plant, where you're looking at about 780 million measurements on a day-to-day basis just to manufacture these aluminum wheels, we're able to identify what is the right operating regime within the foundry, taking into account some upstream processes like the metallurgy of the metal or the melting process, such that when you take further steps downstream to the paint shop, we would have catered for those defects. And one thing that we focus on is not just delivering these AI solutions that are good to talk about or look at, but actually deliver real results that we can quantify. And we're still doing that work, and we're doing a lot of further rollout, but with the first trial, we managed to reduce the defect rate by 40%, which is something that we can actually show on paper to say, okay, this is where your investment is going, and these are the next steps that we want to take you to the next level.
Thanks very much. And it's an absolutely fascinating application of the process, and obviously quite quite valuable to a company that you're providing that to. And I think it gives me a nice segue to Andrea. As you know, a leading VC in South Africa, definitely on the continent, I'm sure as well. You look at thousands of investments or potential investments in a year. How are you going about assessing the value of an AI technology?
So first of all, it is really quite interesting how in the last 2 years, I mean, really you go and get an investment deck and more, somewhere we actually sometimes go through and let's say, which page is the term AI kind of coming up? Because somehow everything that's a little bit about data now has to have the term AI in there. I think first of all, we really have to assess, is this an AI business? And what actually is an AI business? AI at the end is a technology, it's a process, it's a tool. So is Data Profit an AI business, or is Data Profit a company that provides process optimization solutions using artificial intelligence? Yeah. So for me, the first real thing is the company actually really addressing a problem? And is there a big enough need to solve that problem? If they're then using AI, and that means that they have more than just one data scientist who kind of can go and do a bit of data crunching. If they really good, that's fantastic, because of course the amount of data is increasing constantly, and the analysis of data and what you can kind of go and do to slowly kind of go and even prescribe action through this is increasing over and over again. So when we kind of go and look at those investment decks that kind of go and come in, we first of all look at the real business case. If this business case is somehow about, well, there is data involved and what are we going to go and do, then sure, there is normally the AI component. And then the big question really is, does the company have real AI capabilities? Because we find that there are so many who, they have a few software engineers, or they have maybe one data scientist, but that still doesn't make you an AI kind of company. So I think it's about drilling down. It's coming, but at the end, is that AI is really just a way to kind of go and do it. But how do we assess this? I can tell you, we absolutely, I cannot assess how good or bad an algorithm is. I really can't go and do this. And when we do due diligences on AI companies, it's actually quite difficult to find people who can. It's one thing to kind of go, but there are not many service providers out there that you can really go to and say, can you do a technical due diligence on a real good, proper AI company? It is quite challenging. Those skills are not all over. Last time, by the way, we had to use a professor from a university to kind of go and do it.
Well, thanks. I think that leads me very nicely into my next question, actually. So this is working really easily for me.
Over to you.
Professor, I wanted to touch on, if we're looking at tackling the topic of the impact that AI will have on the economies of the African continent, I think Andrea provided a really good lead there, where there's two components here. There's one around, if you're looking at valuing a business and attracting investment and really growing AI across the continent, then someone needs the skills to even analyze whether that business is actually building a true AI tech. But I think, even if we take that one step back, in terms of preparation at an academic level, is Africa ready for AI?
Yeah, by the way, I was going to answer Andrea first, but thank you very much for that eloquent answer. I must give you absolute recognition for that. But moving on to the question that you've asked about artificial intelligence, we in fact asked this question as a university last year. And our question that we asked was that, South Africa's economy has to grow, Africa's economy has to grow. And we know that, we have the traditional mechanisms to grow economies, and that's one. And then there's the second aspect is, we added the oceans economy as something that as a country we've added as a formal structure. But the question that we then asked was that, we have a lot of data around us, and the third industrial revolution, if I can loosely use that, and if you don't like to use industrial revolutions, then that would be classified as the convergence between computing and communications, has helped us to harness maybe 25% of the data that exists in the global world. On the other hand, you have, I think data and oceans are kind of comparable, or maybe the sea in your case, where there is lots of water, but there's not always a single drop to drink. And I think that there's a lot of data, which we've been able to consume 25% or something in that region with the power that we've had. So when we've asked this question, and we said, then how do we enhance the economy or the economic growth through what we can do when we can leverage. By the way, we also had the acronym AI involved with us for a while. So we initially had, it was not the AI that you're thinking about. It was initially called African Insights, which we introduced, excuse the pun, and we introduced that, which was AI. And this year we have introduced a program in artificial intelligence, interestingly for all students in the university. It's a module required for students in the humanities, in the technology disciplines, because we really see that the impact will not be because technologies will develop, but the impact will be when there's a multidimensional, multidisciplinary take of artificial intelligence. By the way, next year we're continuing to retain the AI acronym. We'll be looking at an augmented intelligence, which is where I think societies are eventually going, the convergence between, or the coexistence between man and machine. So we have introduced a number of programs for teaching and learning. We have a master's in artificial intelligence, but it's coming from a mix between humanities and engineering. We have evolved our entrepreneurship programs to netpreneurship, which is just to get more people thinking that we've got to be able to do more. But the real aspect is also, if you one benchmark, I suppose, with AI, is how much computation are you using? Because if you start to run out of energy, which often happens with, let's say, if you take speech recognition, then you start to run out of energy. You need an infinite data set. And I think that challenge is also important because we talk about fourth industrial revolutions, but you have to also understand what you need to get there. So the people component is one. You have to think innovatively about the infrastructure. You have to think in terms of cloud computing. You have to think in terms of data ethics. So in summary, I think that the universities in South Africa, at least, are moving towards this direction. And maybe just to sum up is that when we were going into this journey with the fourth industrial revolution, we thought it was a UJ initiative. It became a national initiative. The Presidential Commission on the Fourth Industrial Revolution, interestingly, my Vice Chancellor, Chalitsi Marwala, is the Deputy Chair of that particular commission. And I know that there are some members here. So it really became also an important journey for the country. And I expect that in March next year, when the Commission's report comes out, it will have implications in all tiers of government, in private sector, and of course for universities, which will, I think, help us gain some traction for education and for policy and different type of support mechanisms that brings it together. But I must emphasize Andrea's point is that the real AI also has the component of developing new algorithms and developing computing, and I think that is an innovation in its discipline. So it's not only about applied artificial intelligence, but also the fundamental aspect of artificial intelligence.
Great. Thank you very much for the comprehensive feedback. I think I might come back to you with a few more skills-related questions. But let me also give Glenn a chance to add. Glenn, Seamonster, I think it'll be useful for you to tell us about what you guys do and how, we touched on augmented intelligence. So you guys are in the augmented reality space, and how is that component converging, and what are you seeing in the space?
I think stories are how people make sense of the world around them, and I'll give you a very specific example, if I can, to kind of bed this stuff down in the present, because it is a clear and present opportunity for businesses. So I think we know that mentorship works best when it is face-to-face and when it is nuanced. Imagine that you are a big bank like FNB, and they have tens of thousands of small business clients. They don't have the capability to be able to have one-on-one conversations, the days of looking your client in the whites of the eyes and making an informed decision. So as they contemplate what their next 10 or 15 or 20 years looks like, they realize that they're dropping tons of data, internally facing data, and typically trailing data, which, and we've run the full extent, I guess, of what that data can reveal to us, and yet they're sitting with a desire to lend money to people, and they're sitting with a genuine desire to help those people succeed, because they realize if they succeed, then we as customers succeed, F&B will succeed. So we've just launched a program with them called Fundaba, and it's made up of tiny bite-sized pieces of animated content in 5 languages. It's got a whole lot of worksheets and infographics, etc. It isn't currently running any specific AI in the background, but what it is doing is it's dropping tons and tons of data sets as it goes. And what we're trying to do over the course of the next few years is we get thousands and tens and hundreds of thousands of people through the program, is seeing whether there's correlation between how you behave online in terms of consuming this data, what modules are you watching, where are you going, what are you doing next, are you arriving at a Silicon Cape event or an AfricArena event? And does that information in some way give us a better indication of whether you should get access to money or which products you might need next? So you're thinking about the future of banking, and if you don't start to prepare for it right now, but what it looks like as a human is just stories, and as you rightly said, the next story on Netflix is prompted for you, and slowly that journey just becomes more intuitive, more natural. It is a friend speaking to you and saying, I think you should do this next. How do you do that at scale? How do you do it in multiple languages? And then how do you use that to shift behavior so that you shift business goals? So that's kind of what we do at Seamonster. I know for a cartoon business, it doesn't say that on the door, but we really are in the behavior change business, and we really are thinking about how animation is bite-sized stories and how games give structure, rules, and feedback to interactions. And then how AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, AI, all of these technologies can be used to actually drive social goals, business goals at scale.
Thanks. I think
Was that semi-coherent? Was that
Semi.
Okay, fine, cool. No, I'm just trying to. I was trying to pick up on a couple of themes, and I just don't know if I went a bridge too far there. So.
No, thanks. I think you tied things together very nicely, and I think touching on that last aspect around business going forward and utilizing AI. I mean, and this one's just to the panel in general. I mean, the obvious question that comes up, and I mean, particularly where I sit within government and looking across sectors and how the country is looking to grow and how the continent's looking to grow. The question that comes up is, is AI going to lead to job destruction? And especially on the African continent, where some may say we're not near prepared enough, and we're also obviously a continent that could use more job-creating industries. So, I mean, is that where you see AI?
I don't know. I personally think that, the mentality that we often have in whatever we analyze is, we always think of job creation versus automation. And so there's this aspect of versus in what we look at. And I think that the answer is, I think the previous industrial revolutions do show us that jobs are displaced. And I think we have to move into the mindset of job creation and automation. And part of it might be that if you write this down, opportunities is nowhere. If you write the characters down and you shift the characters, you see opportunities now here. It's the same characters. It's about whether we know how to shift the gaps. And I think that the mindset that we have to have is actually being able to give people the edge so that they can help us shift the gaps to create employment. The future of work will evolve. And I think so if we see it from that perspective, I think we see employability redefined in a new era, and I think that's how I would see it.
Yeah, I think this narrative is a very, very dangerous narrative. I mean, I agree 100% with you. Yes, absolutely. With artificial intelligence, some jobs will no longer be needed, absolutely. So it will destroy jobs. And others will be created. And I think particularly in a country where we have a lot of unemployment, if we kind of go and start talking too much about will it kind of destroy jobs, I think we kind of go and get to a point where even government might become reluctant to kind of go and support AI. But we have to understand this is where the world is going. And if we as a country hold back, if we don't invest in data scientists who are being, or actually I must say, I love the fact that you're saying that everybody at the university need to kind of go and get and do this AI thing, because it will be across every kind of different sector. So we have to embrace it. And if we hide behind this, let's not do it because it might destroy a few jobs. I think as a country, we will go start falling behind. So we just have to understand other jobs, other opportunities will be created, and as everybody, we have to embrace this.
I think humans love to perfectly prepare to fight the last war. And you know, our government seems to specialize in that area. So yes, one wonders whether our medieval institutions are going to be able to keep up with the rate of change. But the good news about the fourth industrial revolution, or whatever name you want to call it, is to put back things that were previously broken into silos. So I agree with Andrea, what you're saying about making AI sort of compulsory across this. And why this will benefit us is that, you know, whether it is education or whichever issue it is, Africa seems to have a very exaggerated form of the disease. We're you know, massively marginalized. We have these clear and present problems. And so if what you think that the solution to better education is no longer teaching skills in silos, trying to push down a lot of content, but rather to do it holistically and put it back together again, story, games, things like that. It's not, I think that AI is going to help us catch up, but I believe that it will leave government behind. It will make government largely irrelevant because the proxy is right now, and is even with universities. You know, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, all of these organizations no longer require a university degree to enter into them. And the reason is not that, well, the reason is simple, is that for a very long time, we've used those things as proxies to measure the things that are really important: discipline, hard work, creativity, etc. But if you now remove content as the mechanism by which you do that, and you can more accurately assess these so-called fourth industrial revolution skills without your medieval institutions, we will catch up, we will create value. But we will probably do it without governments and universities, except for yours. Okay.
Do you know that government globally, government is the second largest provider after manufacturing provider of data. So, I mean, if somebody should be scared, it should be government, because that's where AI, of course, can definitely go and introduce a few jobs. So,
and any intelligence in government would be welcome.
You said that, not me.
Don't record this. Could you edit that out? Thanks.
And,
no. Sorry.
I agree with Andrea, because it's a very dangerous way of looking at it. So I think there might be a lot that needs to be done in terms of educating the community on what actually AI is and what it can do, and you know, what opportunities will be created. I'll tell you something that we come across, you know, on a regular basis. You find that within something as technical as manufacturing, you've got a lot of experts. You know, some people have been there 30 years and 25 years in the same plant doing the same thing over and over again. But what we found is that experts are not very good at making other experts, because it's not good for job security. So if there's something that needs to be done in the plant, he'll come and do it himself. Because these younger guys, if he teaches them, then you know, he's made redundant. So you'll find that you've got guys who've been working in a particular plant for 25 years, for 30 years, who now know exactly how the plant operates. They could tell you in their sleep. They come and tweak this and come and tweak that. And then when the time comes for them to move on, usually there's a big dip in quality. And what happens is these experts come back as consultants and charge 3 times more than their salary. So what we're actually doing is then, if you use AI, you're not replacing jobs, because you're creating a layer of intelligence on top of what's already existing. Because in our instance, we prescribe or make recommendations to an operator that then makes the change. So it's very much human in the loop. So the human is still there, their job is still intact, but we've just added a layer of intelligence on top. But what we've done is, those changes that the expert was making for the past 5, 10, 15 years, they are in the data. So we've just taken that domain knowledge and kept it in your AI system, such that if he moves on, there's a newer crop of engineers that is coming through. All that experience is in that AI system that is in your plant.
Sure. well.
Really, really interesting. I was busy preparing an extremely hard question for Glenn after calling out government like that, but I'm going to take the advice of Kino and wrap up the panel for the moment so that we can take some questions from the floor. But just to the panel, thank you very much, everyone. It's been super interesting.
Pleasure.
Awesome. Shame. I mean, if you had a go at Glenn, he wouldn't be invited back next year. Did I say there were questions? Okay, there we go. Can you just introduce yourself, sir, and then ask the question?
Hello, everyone. My name is Tekwane Mwendwa from Kenya. We're a company a fintech company that formalizes payments in informal markets. So one of the, you guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So one of the challenges we have as a company, right, is to focus. So what do we focus on? We talk about AI, machine learning. Well, the first problem is digitization of the data, right? So one of my users called Judy trades fish. The one thing that amazed me, this was crazy, right? Over and above what we do, where we save costs, get her insurance, just telling her this is your sales in a month. So she makes $3,000 a month. She had no idea. Like, she's done this business 10 years. She's used mobile money, let's say, for the last 5. And because her business is day to day, where business starts in the morning and ends in the evening, she thinks it on a day-to-day basis. So should we first focus on digitization of the data, where data is very paper heavy, right? You go to the land registry, you have to Google for you have to get like files and migrations. So should we kind of hold off the destruction where we are saying, okay, let's train just lawyers to love digitizing stuff, right? Let's talk to doctors and tell them, stop using prescriptions, get your data online. So should we pause, fund for the digitization phase, basic PHP, nothing fancy, and then move to the next wave? Because we're gonna find ourselves with a lot of AI experts, AI startups, and no data to process.
I think that's something that, it's not just from a small business perspective, but it's something that, even at the level that we're operating at, we see from time to time within some of the biggest manufacturers, where they're still manually capturing data and it's handwritten. So we've, with one company, we had to deal with over 10,000 pages of manually captured data because we need that historical data. So that digitization aspect is very important because it certainly makes our lives easier. Because even from from deploying the solution, you find that 50% of the time is spent on the digital upliftment of the data. So we end up doing the digital upliftment, doing the deployment, but then putting together a roadmap of how they can turn that previously manually captured data into an electronically captured format that creates that data pipeline into the algorithm. So it is very important that that digitization aspect is there, and maybe from our side, how can we then assist such entrepreneurs to start thinking like that?
Can I maybe just add to that? I think that, by the way, you mentioned something about whether we should pause. I really don't think we should pause at all. Pausing is like, it's kind of human nature, but I think what's becoming very different today is that if you remember a few years ago, we used to have folders on our desktops where we used to put files. And today, all of that stuff is in the cloud. And so what happens is that in the past, and by the way, you can actually test this. This is quite interesting. So Google allowed you to scan documents and place that onto Google Drive. And so it collected lots of data, and you were thinking you were simply putting and archiving material on that. So I did that for for a history project where we were archiving material from when apartheid individuals were in prison. So we scanned a lot of this stuff, and it was all on a repository on a Google Drive folder. Now, when you started searching for text, now in the past you wouldn't be able to find the text into the Google into it wasn't the optical character recognition was something that was happening in the background, but it kept on improving. To a point when I started to do the text, I could find that I can access what was scanned previously. By the way, what was most interesting now was that I can do the translation because a lot of this material was written by the South African police at the time in Afrikaans. now I can translate them, and I have tons of information which can now be used for a history project. So I think what's important is that we should have our digitization initiatives, but in parallel, we should also recognize that learning, which builds intelligence, will in fact improve. And we should leverage on that. And the last thing, which will scare you a bit, is that if there were material that you had scanned, like attendance registers in the past, and you had placed them on Google Drive now built its intelligence to be able to scan, to get into the text, as I said earlier. Now, if you do the same search on Google, ordinary search, and if that document is available on the public domain, you can move right into the handwriting and you can find the document. So that's the way that this digitization, even digitization, is automating.
I agree. I mean, access to data is the start of everything AI, but access to data becomes more and more, becomes easier, exactly, by just taking a photo and kind of scanning it in, and those tools become available. So definitely do not stop. I mean, this is the future, this is what is going to happen, and yeah, there's so many different ways to kind of go and get access to data and then use the various kind of learning mechanisms to go and do something with it. So absolutely, it works in the African environment as much as it works everywhere. It can be easier, absolutely, and the more advanced the kind of systems are, but nothing kind of stops us. This is the fact that some of our data is still quite manual is not the reason not to kind of go and start thinking about how to apply AI to solve problems.
Another question. So I have a question.
Yeah, we hear you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't really have a question, but it's kind of a challenge. And I mean, I understand that AI threatens jobs, but perhaps our institutions, our universities can take up the challenge to show how AI can make our labor more productive. So a miner working in a mine is threatened by robotics, but perhaps they can come up with something that enables his job to be more productive, which might be decreasing danger. So there's less deaths and there's less cost to the mine, there's less shutdowns, there's less strikes. Or to construction workers, another big industry, where they can wear certain equipment which prevents them falling off a scaffold because there's devices that detect movement. And we don't necessarily see AI as a threat, but through the institutions bring all of that together to make each laborer more productive than in another country where they don't have all this intelligence.
So, can I go first? Yeah, so I'm not going to comment on the mining example per se, but I can tell you that in the call center industry and within banks and retailers, etc., AI will eat that script for breakfast. And yes, the question is, what are you going to do with those people in the afternoon? And so I think a lot depends on your worldview. And we have a concept in South Africa which is around the dignity of work. And it seems to have been forgotten that in all of the industries, all of these examples, are we really giving dignity to people in the work that they do? And it's something that sits at the core of our belief system at Seamonster, because I would suggest to you that, reading from a script in a call center isn't fun for them, and certainly not for us as customers. So if what you could do is you could free them up, augment their reality through AI, get them to answer all those frequently asked questions, all the things that they're trying to make you do currently, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, and free them up to actually focus on solving problems for their customers. Wouldn't that be a better experience for them and for us? And so I believe there isn't a single industry where if you apply that same logic, you're not going to end up with a better situation for everyone. We might lose some things in the short term, but it will be safer, it will be better, it will be more social, absolutely, and it will create more value for everyone. It's the same.
AI absolutely AI provides insights, And those insights, those data insights can be given to the human to kind of go and make better decisions, whether it's about safety, whether it's about how to do your job better. This whole thing about AI is to kind of go and make everything autonomous, makes everything kind of go and disappear. Yes, there are certain things that it can kind of go and do, but at the end, it is about providing the humans with information and insights that they previously didn't have, and now they can actually make far more informed decisions. And that absolutely applies to security, it applies to decision making, it applies to all those kind of things. So it should actually go and add value in every kind of way of everybody's life and in every kind of job.
Yeah, maybe I definitely agree with you. I think that we do need to amplify more positive messages in terms of what is the socioeconomic impact that artificial intelligence could bring about. You do remind me in the mining context that South Africa does have some of the deepest mines in the world. I think our Tautona mine might be in the region of 4 kilometers deep, and it would be inhumane to send a person into those temperatures. And machines have already started to mine in those areas. I will give an example of an AI initiative which we have. It's called MinPet. It's a project where we use medical technology to examine an ore, and we're able to find very small diamonds, which would have previously those ores would have not been taken for beneficiation processes. So if you start to look at the productivity gain that this brings about, then you start, more people start to see the value of it. The university did produce in the region of about 70 thought leadership perspectives, but I think that we are swinging it more towards the eye for, the eye towards how does it actually help to create new type of jobs. And lastly, and this is a bit of a pun, is that if you think about the iPhone, where the I for innovation or I for impact comes about, and we often think about Steve Jobs as the person, excuse the pun, but Jobs created a lot of jobs in that industry, in the Apple industry. And I think that's how we have to actually start to see that, is when you add the I in front of the way that we do things, we bring in the eye for innovation.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions? I thought you'd never ask.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mafa Matlala. I'm from Prod Smart Technologies. I think my question is still around the socio-economic impact. I'm of the generation of Y2K. There was a lot of excitement and worry about it when it happened, only to find that I suppose it was a bit of a big hoax. So there's a lot of excitement currently around AI and perhaps how it will improve lives. But maybe somebody can take the analogy of a smart city. A lot of efforts to make cities in Africa smart have failed. And I think at the heart of it, of making a city smart, is an AI, I would say, backbone. So how sure and certain are you that all the excitement, all the efforts, all the noise that is happening currently will filter down to the poorest of the poor in the country? Because to a certain extent, organizations, employed people are worried about their jobs, but there are people who are not even employed. There are people who are suffering to even put food on the table. And somehow, a friend of mine said, we're trying to deploy first world solutions to third world problems. So there's a lot of skepticism in the townships where I come from around all this excitement that everyone is talking about. But at the end of the day, our roads still have potholes, grants are paid late, but now we're also then excited about all these first world technologies. I don't know if I've made my point. Thanks.
So I think the term AI as the hype word, we're not going to go in here in, I don't know, 3 years, I don't know when, but because it will just be the way we are dealing with data. Data will impact every place in the world in different speed, but it will. But I really wouldn't see it as a negative, because if somebody now knows where those potholes are and can immediately kind of go and start directing things, if we can kind of go and make sure that the grant systems get allocated again to the right people by doing all those kind of things, it is at the end going to go, and I mean the way that we can work with information, with data, and automate kind of certain things is going to go and have a positive impact. It will just not be called AI, because it will just be the way that some of those systems work. I think it is about, I think the AI hype at the moment, as much as it creates a lot of excitement in some areas, creates a lot of worry in others, but it's because it's maybe too hyped up, and it's being not communicated as just the way we deal with taking data, making it a learning mechanism, and being able to kind of go and provide insights out of this. And that will impact everybody, and hopefully it will impact everybody to the better.
Can I just say something quickly? Hey, listen here, sit down. There's, Saldanha Bay Municipality is a very good example, right? So if you ask any of these Vodacoms or MTNs to come in and lay down a fiber network or an ADSL network, they're going to tell you, oh no, we'll go to the richer areas first because of the trenching costs. Trenching is the single most expensive part of actually getting that data to someone's house. So what Marius Kuhn did, is the mayor of Saldanha. They partnered with the University of Stellenbosch and another business where they did the trenching at risk, right? They then said, once we're done, 80% of the upside you can have as the people who put risk into this project. We as government, because we need to still show income, will take 20%. And what they've managed to do with that is get rid of that very expensive cost to get data through to the poorest areas in the Saldanha area, and they're busy with that project. So for me, it's about leadership. If you have the right people who can pivot and go, okay, I'm not going to wait on Vodacom, I'm not going to wait on these other people, I will innovate around how to get access to the room. Vodacom, you sell that data to whoever at X amount of cost. They now partnered with Cell C. Now, we don't know how long Cell C is going to be around. But they were innovative at the end of the day. So these things can be done. You just need the right leadership to make sure that smart cities can't, if you don't have that type of backbone, you can't run a smart city. And we need more leaders in this country to work with universities, Glenn, while they're still relevant. And I still think they're going to be relevant for a long time, because they're very, very good people like the prof there. And it's about those partnerships at the end of the day that'll get us to where we want to be. And then just the other thing on jobs, aerobotics, right? Imagine trying to find a tree in how many hectares of bloody field? How much productivity don't you waste when you need to go and identify where the problematic areas are? Now they fly drones, they use computer vision, they use machine learning, and they extract in a very short space of time. They can tell you where the problem areas are. And I was fortunate enough to be at the Kluwer farm where they did this. And one of the ladies that used to drive around trying to find the damn stuff is now sitting behind a computer, analyzing the data and directing people in the field. So jobs, they move. It's like I said to APSA as well, they're retrenching all these people, but what are they doing? Instead of giving someone a package that lasts 2 years, why don't you do something over and above that to future fit a lot of the staff? So I'm not worried about the jobs thing. It's a leadership problem. And if leaders don't do the right stuff to make sure that people who lose their jobs go in the right direction, then we've got a problem. So, my little bit.
Yeah, maybe just an interesting perspective is that, I don't know, I think we underestimate the continent. We are a youth, this continent, and I don't know about the stats in Cape Town, I should have checked, but Johannesburg under the age of 24 might be over 50%. And this really indicates that we have a youth population which is much more synchronizes better with technology. And I'll give a very quick example of an experience that I had, because it's actually, it brings the individual, the smartness of the individual. Individuals can also compose to a smart city. if we think about it from in a different perspective. So we went to a restaurant in Maboneng in Johannesburg, and you know, as you go into a restaurant, you want to connect into a Wi-Fi, and that's what we and our group tried to do. And the restaurant had a Wi-Fi which had a password, just like we experienced this morning here. And there was another Wi-Fi hotspot which was active, and it didn't require a password. It had the very similar name of the restaurant, and it was _free. And as you know, South Africans, when they see the word free, you don't worry about the security aspect, you try to log on to it. And when you do, it gives you access to free Wi-Fi, and the first thing it then bounced was a possibility to purchase African craft. So it was kind of intriguing. Think about the setup. You go to a restaurant, you try to connect to the Wi-Fi, you can't, you find a free one, you try to do it, and then you find African craft as a first window. So we asked our waiter, we were talking to him, what do you do, and so on, and he told us that he was busy with the BTech. And we were then around the table looking at each other, look, it is a situation of a BTech grad that is underemployed in a restaurant. And then the more we talked and we got asking him about the Wi-Fi, like, where is this Wi-Fi? And he was really reluctant. He said, no, I don't know where it is. And eventually he said, by the way, it's in my pocket. I have enabled my mobile phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. And you are connected to that. And we said, where is the craft? They said, no, we know that Joburg Central is not very safe. So the craft is in Rosebank and in Sandton because I was with a group of German tourists. And so they said, well, where do you stay? Well, Rosebank and Sandton. They said, well, just order and it will be at the reception because it's already there. And so I would really say that individuals have a different way of looking at it, and the future of work is changing. And I think that people and our youth see this very differently. So when we think about smart cities, we may be thinking of governments and provinces and yada trying to build it, but the youth see the I is also about the individual. And I think they see it differently. So I think smart redefined is also a possibility.
And I think just 1 minute, if I may. One of the first things you mentioned when you were asking your question was, how certain are we? And I think, it's something that we've heard a lot of times that, the only thing we can be certain of is death and taxes, right? And even, if you talk to a broker who manages your millions, there's a disclaimer somewhere. There's a risk of, loss of capital, and you can't be certain he's going to give you 10% return. But, it's possible. So I think in terms of AI, how we should look at it is, Andrea talked about hype. There's a lot of hype as with anything new that happens. And more often than not, the hype outweighs the practical applications. So the focus should be on the practical applications, because you see there are a lot of papers that are coming up, a lot of experts talking about a lot of things. And when we sit down with clients, most clients will say, you know what? We know the theory. We know this is happening. We know this can happen. We want somebody who can take the theory and apply it practically. So I think we need to focus on the practical application. That's what's going to drive AI in the future, and you'll find most of these noise is going to fall away.
Amen to that, brother. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
And finally, we will worry about how intelligent artificial intelligence is, and I don't know who's got 2-year-olds running around the house, but if you say, hey, Google, switch on whatever blippy on TV, right, it'll take your 2-year-old about a week before he goes, hey, Google, which is what my son does. But the problem is Google doesn't understand him, so who's the clever one? So we're still much more intelligent than computer systems that are trying to emulate who we are. So thank you very much to the panel. Wonderful chat. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks. Great work.